Hey everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this Netflix review. The fact that you are willing to sacrifice a few minutes out of your day to consume my content really does mean the world to me, and I really do appreciate it. For those of you that are unaware, I try to review everything that gets released on Netflix. So if you're ever curious about whether something is good or bad or completely mediocre, come to my channel because I want to save you time and help you find the best fit for you. So guys, let's jump right into my review of Centaurworld. And I'm going to tell you, this is literally a roller coaster of a series with all the ups and downs. The only difference is with a roller coaster, you get off after a few minutes. This keeps going non-stop. Just throughout the entirety of the series is just an up and down roller coaster. And I mean that in regards to entertainment, enjoyment, immersion. This series goes through a wide variety of just everything. So let's jump right into the story, and I'm going to break down everything about what worked about the series and what I feel just really didn't. So basically, Centaurworld centers around the story about a relationship between a warhorse and her rider, and we actually get a great action sequence in the very first episode, in the first few minutes, where we see this rider and her horse really defeat the odds. They battle armies, and it's just such a great, awesome action set piece. But unfortunately, the rider and the warhorse are separated by this magical amulet. There's this magical portal, for lack of a better word, and the warhorse finds herself in a place called Centaurworld. And all of a sudden, she discovers she can talk, and she runs into this herd of centaurs. Now, these aren't what you would expect from centaurs. Yes, they are half horse and half human predominantly, but at the end of the day, they are just cartoons. And what I mean by that is that feeds into their very personality. They are larger than life, they are zany, they are crazy. They're almost mentally unstable is what it feels like at times. They find it very hard to focus on just one thing. Everything is a joke. They're magical beings, but even their magic themselves are reoccurring jokes. And so it can be very overwhelming very quickly and can break your immersion when you're trying to engage with these characters on an emotional level. But everything is just a joke. But ultimately, Warhorse decides, cool, I'm going to use this herd to navigate through this magical world so I can get back to my rider, so we can go fight the war that's happening back on my plane of existence. That's ultimately the sum of the story. And now let's break into the different aspects of what worked and what didn't really work, in my opinion. Let's start off with characters, because I broke them down a little bit. Ultimately, our core cast of characters, and I'm mainly regarding the centaurs here. They're memorable characters, I can tell you that much. Are they memorable for the right reasons? That's where the debate comes in. I mentioned earlier that this series is like a roller coaster, and I mean every single word of that. Because these characters just do not stop. They are constantly joking around, they are constantly playing around. And when we have a very emotional story like what we have here, ultimately, the core of the story, the heart of the story is a very emotional one. When we have an emotional story, we want these emotional elements, we want these emotional story beats. And we do get them, but they're such a rare treat because they're so few and far between, because majority of the story is just filled with jokes, misadventures, and ultimately these centaur characters, these cartoon characters, treating everything like a cartoon. There's no gravity to any situation they find themselves in. And that's actually where we get this great character development from Horse. The warhorse in this show, her name is Horse. And ultimately, we get her developments from the super gruff, rough person that only knows war. And now she's building relationships with these people that only know the exact opposite, having fun and joking around. We get these two different viewpoints on life, these two different ways to approach life. And so we get this clash. And that's probably the most entertaining part of the series. It's these characters trying to learn how to engage with one another. But I will say this, when it comes to the characters, a lot of the time it feels like it's almost as if the creators of the show are expecting us to have such short attention spans that these characters always have to be joking, they always have to be doing something, and they just have to be, it literally feels like this. Like, this is an exaggeration. Like, it gets hard to watch this series at some point because the characters just keep quiet, just stop. We need some calmness. I'm going to use the roller coaster metaphor again. If you're on a roller coaster doing this 24/7, it stops being enjoyable. And that's a large part of this series as well. You keep doing this, I can't just focus on the series because my brain is doing this. And that's the biggest weakness of the series. But it also does a great way of illustrating the two different worlds, the world that Warhorse comes from and Centaurworld. Because the world where Warhorse comes from is torn apart by war, death, destruction. So of course she's just going to be stern face, business, ready to fight. Whereas the cartoon characters, whereas Centaur characters, they're a lot more flamboyant and exciting and extravagant because that's the only world they know. And so that's a great illustration of the two different backgrounds of the characters, despite the fact that it can become increasingly difficult and almost frustrating to watch. But I will say a lot of people are going to enjoy that aspect of the series. This feels a lot like Final Space in its type of humor and comedy. I was a big fan of Final Space, despite the humor not necessarily landing for me. But I think if you are a fan of Final Space, this is a series you might find enjoyable, you might find a little bit funny. I will say the series' strongest part, like by far the biggest strength of this series, were the musical elements. These songs were great. They were really engaging, really emotional. I feel like the series is really at its peak when we get these emotional, powerful songs. Of course, not every song is brilliant. There are some misses in my opinion. But for the most part, these soundtracks are just gorgeous and the performers are amazing. I really find it hard to engage with musicals sometimes. One of my favorite movies of all time is a musical, so I've got nothing against musicals. But if a musical isn't done right, I can really feel just like, okay, that's enough. Stop singing, that's too much. Stop. But I found myself looking forward to the musical segments in this series. And I don't know if it was necessarily because the music was just that great, or because I knew it would be a break from the constant blabbering and over-the-top nonsense from the Centaur characters. But I found those musical segments to be so incredibly enjoyable. Of course, we can't go talking about an animation series without talking about the animation. It was beautiful. This animation was absolutely beautiful. I have an issue with the design of the characters, however. In many ways, this is your typical modern animation story. I mean, you can look at it, you can see influences from Rick and Morty, Adventure Time, Final Space. Everything has the same animation style nowadays. And while I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of it, I can see why it is successful. What I will say though is, at times these characters can come off as incredibly uncomfortable to watch. Some of the jokes really made me feel uncomfortable. These visual gags really made me cringe. I was trying to enjoy myself, but then we get this really awkward joke where a character's standing in a very provocative way. And I'm like, should I be fighting a centaur giraffe in that pose? Maybe not. So there was a lot of sequences and the animation decisions made me feel honestly uncomfortable watching them. And I understand that this was for comedic effect, but when I'm feeling awkward at a joke, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. When it comes to the comedy, I won't lie, I found myself laughing a lot more than I thought I would, especially in the later episodes. I think it takes a few episodes to get into the style of comedy that the series is about because it's very overbearing, it's very in your face, it does not stop, it's just joke, it just won't stop. But once you've accepted the fact that it's going to be over the top, that it won't stop, that it'll keep coming at you, once you realize you're going to be bombarded by jokes, you just accept it, then it becomes cool. Okay, this is a joke. Okay, that one was funny. Now I can enjoy it. I feel like ultimately to enjoy this series, you have to understand what it's like. You really have to put yourself through the first few episodes and get an understanding of the roller coaster ride that the series is. I'm going to recommend this series again to fans of Final Space, Rick and Morty, Adventure Time. This is definitely made in the same vein as those series, but I feel like they've really amped it up to the nth degree. But if you're a die-hard animation fan, I would recommend this series to you because especially in the final two episodes, those two episodes were so engaging for me. They really upped the emotional attachment behind the characters. They really hammered home the story, and I really enjoyed that. So the first few episodes might be a little bit rough, but don't let that stop you from watching some really great episodes near the end. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please subscribe. You guys are the best. You're awesome. And I hope to see you again in another review.